Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Shelly, and what are we doing today? I'm so excited that I don't even want to do my normal introduction because of what we're doing today. So today, this video idea, let me back up. This video idea has been inspired by GARBAUGUST, which is an event that I am hosting with Criminali and a whole pack of other dirty hosts. There are 13 of us, and with this event we are adventuring, we are exploring the world of garbage books, trashy books, this genre, bad books, okay? And so one of the things that keeps on popping up are critical reviews versus reader reviews. And I'm talking like book critic reviews, people who write and review books for a living and are getting paid to do that, versus like what readers think of the book. And there is this growing dichotomy. There are these little skirmishes and battles that have been going on BookTube. Some channels out there are wondering, why do we even need book critics? And then you have basically Steve Donahue on the book critic side saying, we are so important. Now, where do I stand in this battle, in this dichotomy, or on these two warring halves? Where do I stand? Well, I actually really appreciate, admire, and value book critics. Shocker. I am a librarian by training. I have my master's degree in library and information science, and I also have children, one of which is calling for me. So as I was saying, I'm a librarian. I'm a librarian by trade. This is my world that I occupy. And I do know that librarians rely on professional reviews in order to make some of the decisions they need to make in order to run the library. So one large decision would be purchases for the library. Also, reviews are absolutely key when recommending a book because despite what some people think, most librarians have not read every book in the library. And so, librarians use reviews to help understand what a book is about and what reader might be best paired with that book. So I absolutely adore professional reviews and I hold them in high regard. And so here's what I was thinking. You can actually check the work of a reviewer by looking at vintage reviews. And so that's what we're doing today. We're going to be looking at vintage reviews of wildly popular and amazing classics. And we're going to see, what did the reviewer first think when they read this book? When the reviewer was the first person to get their hands on it and the first person to get their opinion out there about this work, what did they say? And were they right? So, I have reviews from the 1930s, the 1940s, and one from 1970. I'm going to start with the oldest book and work my way through. And I will also leave timestamps down below to help you navigate this video because I wouldn't be surprised if it gets a tiny bit long. One final note is that all of these reviews are Kirkus reviews. Kirkus Reviews is a review journal that has been around since quite literally the dawn of time. They have reviewed every single book that has ever been written. Not actually, but that's what it feels like. And interestingly, Kirkus doesn't put the individual name of the reviewer to each review. It just says that Kirkus is the one that reviewed it. And so the voices of these reviewers are going to change. And these reviewers are anonymous. So we can just say, Kirkus, how dare you put out that review for that book? All right, so all of these are Kirkus reviews. I'll tell you in what year this review came up, what they were reviewing, and a tiny bit of context, especially if I needed it in order to understand that reference in the review. Okay, are we ready? Starting with the oldest book, a mammoth, and one that I finished this year, and that is Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind. Okay, so Gone with the Wind received a starred review from Kirkus in 1936, June of 1936. There is a reference to a book called So Red the Rose by Stark Young, which I had no idea about. I have notes here, by the way. And Stark Young apparently wrote a Civil War novel published in 1934, 2 years before Gone with the Wind was published. And it was, I believe, sort of the standing touchstone for Civil War literature back in the day. Okay, so here is the review. Don't sell this as primarily a novel of the Civil War. Sell it rather as a novel in human emotions against the background of the Civil War and its aftermath. It has the finer qualities of So Red the Rose, the authentic picture of people and places and incidents, something of the moonlight and honeysuckle of the glamorous Old South, much of the traditions and manner of life and thought. It has too great length. The author will learn with experience the valuable and essential lesson of selection. From the point of view of story and characterization, I found it more absorbing reading, more vital characterization than the Stark Young book. Instead of taking form of a succession of pictures from a family album, the characters come to life with the impact of life upon them, and their impact one upon the other. The central figure is a girl, spoiled, selfish, dominating, willful, magnetic. You hate her, you long to throttle her, but you can't help acknowledging her fascination and admiring spirit. An opportunist, yes, but she pays the price. The author comes from the state of which she writes, Georgia, and she knows her background thoroughly. She can write. The reviewer definitely got some things right and also got some things wrong, in my opinion. The first thing that I thought was kind of funny, and that I even chuckled at, was that the reviewer said that the novel has too great a length. And that is true. This book is massive. I think this is over 1,400 pages. When I read this, I buddy read it with my friend George, and one of the things that he and I constantly were critiquing was that this book could have been edited down quite a bit. So I absolutely agree. Unfortunately, the reviewer also mentioned that this is something that Margaret Mitchell will learn with time as a writer. And as we know now, Margaret Mitchell didn't write any other novels. This is her one and only. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 1937, I believe. And yeah, so we never got to see where her writing could have taken her. I also think that his description, his or hers, the reviewer's description of Scarlett was pretty funny. You hate her, you want to throttle her, and yet she fascinates you. And I absolutely agree with that. I also think that the reviewer picked up on the fact that Margaret Mitchell was a great historian of her day. I heard that she was really interested in the newspaper clippings of that when the Civil War was going on, and really trying to understand what Georgia was like in day-to-day life during the time when there was battles all around them. And then my critique is that there is in my opinion, very, very racist language in this book. It's very, very unkind to Black characters in the book, and at times extremely disheartening. And the review says nothing about that. I think that's very curious. Before we move on with Gone with the Wind, I do want to say that I have a full, lengthy review on my channel of Gone with the Wind, and it's great. It's very thorough, in my opinion, and I would encourage you to watch it. However, if Gone with the Wind is one of your favorite books and you don't want to hear some strong critiques of it, maybe skip that video, but I will leave it linked down below. The next review comes from 1938, okay? So just a couple years later, and it is none other than Rebecca by Daphnie du Maurier. This got a starred review from Kirkus in 1938, and here is the review. A brilliant piece of writing with the atmosphere and suspense and pace that made Jamaica Inn an absorbing and thrilling read. And it has, besides, a depth of characterization and soundness of psychological conflict that makes it a finer and more penetrating book. The story is told through the eyes of the unsophisticated and somewhat terrified young second wife of Maxim de Winter, owner of Manderley, a Cornish estate that has won renown under the executive management and fascination of the first Mrs. de Winter, Rebecca. Bit by bit, the character of Rebecca is built up in the mind of her successor, and the sinister figure of the housekeeper who had adored her this strengthens the conviction that her ghost haunts the place. Then comes disaster, impending tragedy, and in the face of what seems the end of all things, a new Rebecca emerges, and a new marriage is brought to life. A haunting sense of impending tragedy keeps one breathless to the end. It is a fascinating reading, should be easy to sell, easy to rent. What a fantastic review. First of all, I felt like this is a great review because it tells you what the book is, what you're going to get, the previous work that the author wrote, and the way that Rebecca compares to Jamaica in. And I feel like it gives such a great and concise plot summary or summary of what you're going to get without giving any spoilers, which I cannot say for a review that's coming up. I thought the only curious thing was that it said it should be easy to sell. I think that the word should maybe is not the best choice of a word when you're thinking about a book critic. I would rather just easily say it's going to be easy to sell and then easy to rent. Does that mean renting from the library? And it's funny because if it does mean rent, as in rent from the library, we don't use that term, at least where I'm at least in my town, we say to borrow, like, you know, you're going to borrow the book. So I don't know if it's just a tiny pedantic thing or if language has actually changed in regards to the verb we use when taking books out from the library. And so this is, so anyhow, 1938 review of Rebecca. The next review that I'm going to read is going to be of one of my favorite books of all time. I absolutely love this book. It was originally written and published in 1943, and that is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. This also received a starred review in 1943. This review is a reprint, and there are a couple of sentences providing context, and I will read that for you. And I will say that I think the reviewer did give slight spoilers to some major plot points in this book. And so I wanted to forewarn you before listening to this review. Okay, are we ready? This is a repeat for a novel we reported last March. See page 125. We liked it then, we like it still. Literary Guild choice for September. It should go farther than the usual first novel. Here is the original review. A first novel of unusual quality and understanding, written with strong realism and compassion. Sometimes bald, always human, this rightfully ranks with the feral genre, though to my thinking there is a better balance and more sympathy. The slums of Brooklyn and the Irish Catholics form the setting for the story of Francie Nolan and her family. Johnny, her father, handsome and shiftless. Katie, her mother, hardening over years of poverty and improvidence. Neely, Katie's favorite child, Aunt Sissy, the good, bad woman, and chiefly Francie herself. Gentle, shy, imaginative, the reader shares her humiliations at school, loss of face and pride, her real sorrow when her father drinks himself to death, her ambition for a college education thwarted when she must go to work at 14, her first love affair and disillusionment, lusty, sometimes funny, constantly moving. This is a book for a discriminating public, not too tender-skinned, but not for some public library open shelves, though some of the crudities of the original script have been ironed out. Betty Smith is a more than promising young author, a Harper find. Wow, okay, kind of a lot to unpack here. I, again, feel like the reviewer gave away a few more plot beats than I would have given away. I think that the summary was still really great. I have looked up this genre called the feral genre, and I cannot find a lot on it. So if you all are great researchers, or maybe have a tiny bit more time than me, then if you can look up the feral genre, that would be really great. But I think it's a very specific kind of genre that was written in the 1940s. Don't quote me on that though. One of my favorite things to note though about this review is really the last part. It says, not for some public library open shelves. I don't know about you all, but my town doesn't have open and closed shelves anymore, and I think it's almost hilarious to think that A Tree Grows in Brooklyn might be like behind the curtain or behind the librarian's desk, inaccessible to just any patron to pull off. That seems hilarious to me because this book is pretty mild with its ostensible crudities, you know? And also, I thought that it was funny that it was saying that it's for a discriminating public, whereas I sort of unabashedly recommend this to anybody. Yeah, I absolutely love this review. I thought it was really apt to say that Betty Smith is going to go far, because I would say that A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is one of the most loved coming of age stories of all time. And if you haven't read it, this is a fantastic, an absolutely fantastic book to read. Now we've come to a review that I actually don't care for because I feel like it gives away too many plot beats. So if you have not read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison from 1970, then I would actually encourage you to perhaps skip this review, especially if you're planning to read this. This is Toni Morrison's first book, and I feel like the reviewer was the most flowery with their language when describing and critiquing this book. There is no mention that this is Morrison's debut novel, but it has a couple of really interesting things to say. And if you've read it, let me know, like if you've read The Bluest Eye, can you listen to this review and tell me like if you think this actually matches like what you experience with this book? How do you take the review? Okay, so it says, this soil concludes the young narrator of this quiet chronicle of garroted innocence is bad for all kinds of flowers. Certain seeds it will not nurture, certain fruit it will not bear. And among the exclusions of white rural Ohio, echoed by black respectability, is ugly, black, loveless 12-year-old Pecora. But in a world where blue-eyed gifts are clucked over and admired, and the Pecoras are simply not seen, there is always the possibility of the dream and wish for blue eyes. Born of a mother who adjusted her life to the clarity and serenity of white households and acquired virtues that were not easy to maintain, and a father, Charlie, stunted by early rejections and humiliations, Pecora just might have been loved. For in raping his daughter, Charlie did at least touch her. But love is never better than the lover. And with the death of her baby and the child herself, accepting absolutely the gift of blue eyes from a faith healer whose perverse interest in little girls does not preclude understanding, inches over into madness. A skillful, understated tribute to the fall of a sparrow for whose small tragedy there was no watching eye. This is not a starred Kirkus review. It's the first non-starred review that we've come to. I really loved The Bluest Eye. I think sometimes there were some parts that didn't work for me with it, but overall it was a really strong debut from Morrison. And what's interesting is that while reading this review, I feel like the reviewer talked about The Bluest Eye, but didn't give you any kind of verdict or advice as to if you should pick it up as a reader. Whereas the other reviews had a lot stronger language, even so much as it should sell well, it should rent well, you know, that kind of thing. So I feel like that is missing from this review. So I'm wondering if we are just getting a young book reviewer, reviewing a debut work and wasn't sure how to critique it, or if this book was just lost on the reviewer themselves. Okay, so we have moved on to the final book review, and I feel like it is scathing for how I felt about the book, and that is the 1974 nonfiction work of Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. Me and this reviewer, we really got into it a couple of times, so let's see if I can actually read this review without being super offended. Though, I mean, I guess if I'm being fair, the reviewer was quite balanced. Okay, this did not get a starred review, and here's what it says. This is our life. These are our lighted seasons. And then we die. In the meantime, in between time, we can see. We can work at making sense of what we see to discover where we so incontrovertibly are. It's common sense. When you move in, you try to learn the neighborhood. Dillard's neighborhood is hilly Virginia country where she alone lived, but essentially it is all those shreds of creation with which every human is surrounded, which she is trying to learn, to know. From finite variations to infinite possibilities of being and meaning. A tall order, and Dillard doesn't quite fit it. She is too impatient to get about the soul's adventures to stay long with an egg-laying grasshopper or other bits of flora and fauna. And her snatches from physics and biological/metaphysical studies are this side of frivolous. However, Miss Dillard has a great deal going for her. In spite of some repetition of words and concepts, her prose is bright, fresh, and occasionally emulates, not imitates, the Master Walden in a contemporary context. Trees extend impressively in both directions, shearing rock and fanning air, doing their real business just out of reach. She has set herself no less a task than understanding emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually the force of the creative extravagance of the universe in all its beauty and horror. There is a terrible innocence in the imbued world of lower animals, reducing life to a universal chomp. Experience can be focused and awareness sharpened by a kind of meditative high. Thus, this becomes somewhat exhaustive reading if taken in toto, but even if Dillard's reach extends her grasp, her sights are leagues higher than that of Anne Morrow Lindbergh's Gift from the Sea, regretfully re her sex, the inevitable comparison. So there was a mention of this book, Morrow Lindbergh's Gift from the Sea, which are essays, a book of essays. And I do like the reviewer was kind enough to say that Annie Dillard set her sights higher than Lindbergh. But Dillard, this didn't get a starred review, and I feel like it was a bit critical, saying that Dillard was repetitious and a bit frivolous. I don't hold that opinion at all in the least. But interestingly, Dillard went on to win the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction for this work, and this work has since been sort of folded into the canon of nonfiction nature writing as one of the meditation on nature for like more modern writers or living writers. I mean, this book is incredible. This was not my experience. I loved every second of Dillard's writing, and I was all for it all of the time. Okay, so yeah, I just absolutely loved it, and I couldn't believe that I read this. By the way, this kind of sounds like Steve Donahue. So Steve, were you writing in 1974? I would imagine that you were writing still in 1924. I mean, I believe that you've been writing since the dawn of time. But is this your review, Steve? Because this kind of sounds like you. Just saying. Well, that's it for me. How did you like this video? I would be really curious to know. Do you like these kind of vintage reviews from Kirkus? Do you do this type of thing? Read old vintage reviews of books that you read? I feel like this is kind of a niche thing. Anyhow, tell me how you like the video. I would really appreciate it since this is a bit different for my channel. But anyhow, thank you for watching. Thank you for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.